Welcome. My name is Travis Millett, and this presentation is going to cover my senior project and my USU Aviation Safety Culture Survey. So, this senior project is my safety culture survey. Basically, identified the need within the program to find some sort of information gathering tool to assess where we're at in USU aviation, what the culture is at, how we're doing, or is the culture itself at USU safe? The overall goal of this survey personally was I really wanted to have something that I can give back. I've been in this program for 4 years, as we'll discuss in a second, and wanted to make something that was long lasting, that could be used far beyond when I'm gone. This is a very good format that we'll talk about later, that hopefully in the future, and the stuff that comes out of this survey, we'll be able to identify and hopefully solve the needs that come up within our culture to make the program that much more safe. So, a little background about me. Obviously, I'm Travis. I've been out at the Utah State Eastern Campus for the last 4 years. Started basically from nothing. Got my private down here all the way up through my CFI, multi-engine, and double I out of this Southern Campus. I'm married. You can see my beautiful wife there at the Reno Air Races. I am from Reno, that's where I was born and raised. And now I'm heading back there. So they're really fun. As you can see, I'm graduating this year, 2026. I'm a dual major in aviation technology, obviously professional pilot side, with a secondary major in airport management. And I have a minor in UAS systems. Cover my bases on all the things. Again, USU CFI out here for the last roughly 2 years. A little less there once I finally got hired on. And then I've been a part of the USU Aviation Safety Committee for the last 3 years. I started end of my freshman year, and I've continued it until now. So that's really where I actually got my inspiration for this survey, is through that committee and all of that experience that I've had working in USU safety and understanding how the inner workings of this culture that we're developing and growing on really works. So this entire survey, I really relied heavily on that experience, and you can see that throughout this entire survey. So, what is a safety culture? So we got to define the term before we really start getting into it. According to our own operations manual for the fixed wing stuff, a safety culture is a combination of actually a few different cultures, right? It has to be reporting, just, flexible, learning, and informed cultures. And you can see all the definitions there. I'm not going to dive in too much into detail, but I'm going to give a brief overview of what each culture, contributes to the big safety culture as a whole. So, a good, safe culture is informed. This is both within aviation. You can't have a good aviation safety culture if they don't know anything about aviation. And they have to understand exactly how their operation operates, right? Hey, is your chief pilot doing this? Is your CFIs or your maintenance personnel, what are they doing every day, right? Now, reporting. This is a big portion that we've actually strived for the last 4 years within the committee and USU as a whole to actually report. Again, a good safety culture reports the incidents so everyone can learn, which is another one, from what is actually going on. If no one reports, no one's going to get anything, and you won't know exactly what is going on. Just things that do come up, right? We want to make sure that we're not, throwing the metaphorical book at someone if they mess up, but we don't want to not handle problems at all that do come up, so that the same mistakes can at least be solved. Flexible, again, everything in aviation has to be flexible regardless what culture you're into, right? We're an up and down industry, so you have to adapt to the changes. And learning, again, this is not just mistakes, it's not just learning from reports, this is also learning from successes. Hey, what did we do well? What did we not do well? What are the biggest safety concerns, which we'll talk about later? And criticisms. Hey, what is our internal people saying about our operation? What is external people saying about our operation? What do we, need to work on? and can we learn from all of those criticisms and mistakes and successes to hopefully make a better, safe program and culture. So, the plan, outcome, and desires of this survey is the following, right? I want to discover where we're at, right, across all of our programs. That is including, fixed wing side of things, helicopters, drones, maintenance. We're all USU aviation at the end of the day. So the survey is meant for everyone, which we'll talk about in target audience. But again, discover where we're at. Now, gather that information, gather some focused information as well for various different questions to see how we are comparing with the safety culture definition I just defined previously, and then analyze all the numbers, analyze the data, analyze the responses, and exactly where we are at in the culture and how can we improve. So before we get into the format and the exact survey, one big thing here is that we want to highlight the known safety hazards and issues. Again, I've been here for 4 years, so I kind of have a pretty good rough idea about what's going on. So Logan, I've done a little bit of time up there. Not a ton, as most of my stuff's been in Price, but I do know a lot of the issues that go on up there. It is a crazy airport. There's a lot of aircraft in that Logan Valley, and they're all in kind of a tight space, especially in that pattern. So that's one of the biggest issues, even before this survey, came out, that the committee covered traffic-related issues all the time. Leading Edge, so they're the other flight school out of Logan. Again, those guys, they do operate out of there, so we just want to make sure that they, the certain operations and how they differ can be a little bit of a safety concern as they clash with our operations and our procedures. There is a large GA reference. Gliders are a big thing out of Logan, as well as kind of that whole mountain range up there. So that is another concern, and maintenance, right? Maintenance practices, and that do come up. They're getting a lot better, but there's still little things here or there. As for my home campus, we got wind and maintenance. Wind, weather, super unpredictable down in Price. That's been a huge safety concern. We have to cancel flights just because the winds decided to pick up unforecasted. Maintenance, Price has been a very up and down maintenance as we get into the results. It does show that, but even prior to this, we've had maintenance personnel come and go, leave for a variety of different reasons. So we haven't had a consistent maintenance base. Brigham, I don't know too much about Brigham. I'll say that right out of the gate. However, I do know they had very similar maintenance problems before the survey came out to Price. Right, they're both external campuses. We both need maintenance help from Logan if we do not have our own internal maintenance, like Price does currently. So we just have to rely on those Logan resources, which can be an issue, as well as there's been some reports within the committee that air traffic near Brigham area and the practice areas that have been established are getting quite busy. It's because of the Ogden Valley kind of going up. So those are the known ones, and that's pretty much the baseline. And we can compare where we are once we get to the results. So how this survey is pretty laid out is, target audience is, again, USU aviation personnel. I divided it into 4 categories. You had USU aviation students across fixed wing, helicopters, drones, maintenance personnel, etc. Leadership, and that includes like chief pilots. That includes school personnel, like teachers, people that have the knowledge on the inner workings of how USU aviation really works. Then you have your flight operations personnel. This includes maintenance staff, FBO staff at a Price, or dispatch staff at a Logan, and any other operational personnel that may be considered under that. And lastly is us flight instructors. It's an entire big demographic that we definitely want to test. The format for this survey is based off of Qualtrics. It's a USU in-house program that we do use. Works quite well. Again, I'll have multiple choice and free response questions. There's not too much in there. Roughly about 25 questions per role. That includes your general questions and your role-specific questions in there. And then, my big sampling method and how I get it out there is hey, QR codes. Once we get to the execution phase, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but putting it out to Canvas, emails, etc., just so it gets out of there. And then the last portion of this is just data analysis. Qualtrics has an entire section just on how to analyze various different data sets and make certain conclusions and make it all in a nice visual format. So, how I did it. Timeline. I'm not going to go through all this because it's quite extensive. I started this, technically the idea sparked, summer of 25, and now we're, a semester and a half in that this project has been going. Again, it has been a long road of trial and error, coming up with different questions. What exactly do we want to ask? Working with our, safety officer, Richard, to make sure that we, make this survey into something that's actually worthwhile. Obviously, we actually sent this survey out first thing this last spring semester to get the data that we were able to gather. Overall, there's about 600 total USU aviation personnel across all the campuses. This is including everyone. And we actually got about roughly 148. So not too bad. Just above a sixth, right? Not almost a fifth, but not there yet. So for a survey that's anonymous, which we'll talk about in a minute, it's really not too bad. But again, hopefully in the future, if we do this survey again, we can get a little bit more numbers up. So, as mentioned, this was an anonymous survey that tested, again, all these various different safety questions associated with that culture definition that we defined earlier. So, what were the results? What did we get? Well, overall, again, I had a few questions in the very beginning that tested this, as well as looking at the individual roles and campus-based questions to see where we were actually falling. And overall, we seem pretty safe. Okay, across all 4 different roles, there's not many people that don't think we're not similar to the definition provided, and that we're not considered safe. The participation is actually quite high, and understanding how to participate in it. It's understandable for, as you can see in the graphs here, that the students demographic are pretty well spread out. If you think about it, you have privates that are just now getting into the culture, learning, and then you have more experienced students, i.e. maybe multi-engine students, or those who have their CFI but are not internally working through USU. And they say, they have a little more say and understanding of how the program itself works. Speaking of flight instructors, they showed up. They showed up really well in this survey, and just about a little over half of the total flight instructors from all campuses were actually able to respond to this entire survey. So that was really, really good, and really good feedback as we continue through these results here. All right, as for Logan results, we got about 123 participants. Again, this is about a fourth of the overall participants out of the Logan campus. Pretty big demographic. As we get to the other 2 little campuses, you'll notice that they're a lot less just because there's not as much people there that you can sample. This is the data specifically for Logan didn't mirror the overall, culture. Hey, the safety culture is roughly pretty safe. Overall, hey, it might probably operate safely. As you can see there, right? We're pretty close. We're not entirely there, but it was pretty spread out, mirroring that overall results there, which makes sense because the largest data set is Logan. Now, with that said, there's a lot of safety concerns brought up, mainly by a lot of the CFIs and some of the students, but the CFIs were the main people that wanted to raise all these safety concerns up. As well known, traffic pattern is still an issue. That needs to be solved. We'll get into how that can be solved a little bit later, but pretty big area that almost every comment that we got from this open-ended free response question said traffic in some way, shape, or form. A couple others was, again, other traffic in Logan Valley. Leading edge was a small one, not as big as we originally thought, but a little bit small. Program pressures, this includes, hey, you're forcing students to get to check rides. There's a couple comments on that. There's a lot of pressure even before like a student has an EOC that they have to get a check ride. And from my current knowledge, we're working through that. Maintenance, a little bit of comments about maintenance. Some maintenance issues that do come up. Hey, they're just kind of, we had this issue come up. They said they fixed it, and then all of a sudden they didn't fix it. Or, hey, we did try to down this. They said it was fine, went up, and had the same thing happen again. Some little stuff like that. And ironically, there was also some SOPs, so standard operating procedures, comments that did come up saying, hey, these are either too restrictive in some areas and not in the others, or kind of vice versa there. But a variety of different comments associating those, standard procedures that we do have, and kind of a mixed bag on that. All right, now for my home campus. So we got about 18 total participants. Ironically, this is about a third. We only have roughly about 60 people operating out of the Price location, so this was really, really good turnout from Price. This one, they generally agree that the culture and USU operates safely. It's either probably or definitely. There was no, maybe, or might not, kind of group. None of that in Price. Could be seen as safest. That might be my personal bias, but we do have a little bit of different safety concerns. We operate a little bit differently than Logan or Brigham, which we'll talk about. Big thing is maintenance. Again, maintenance situation in Price is pretty complex, to say the least. Again, because I've been out here the longest, we will hire someone on and they'll leave. So it's just been kind of up and down, mixed bag. Right now, the big concern that a lot of the comments happened was, hey, the maintenance personnel that work here we did lose our recent mechanic for a medical issue, but they pointed out like, hey, there's certain things that were down, very similar to Logan, and then we brought back up and the same issue happened, as well as comments after the fact, a little later on in the semester, once our maintenance personnel was no longer with us, that we now have to rely on Logan for a lot of our maintenance issues, and they're not getting completed in a timely manner, and that many people feel that we're not downing aircraft for maintenance related things just because of the distance we now have to travel in order to get our planes up. So that's kind of a big one there. Weather was a big one. Unforecasted. Winds were, a big talking point throughout the entire, free response section. A couple instructors that did respond did mention a lot about the different wind patterns and how they can get out of our USU SOP limitations quite quickly. Aircraft storage is another one. Again, we just had a new maintenance hangar built out of the Price campus, but you can't really store much aircraft in there. And the aircraft we can store goes in the big hangar. Well, we also operate the airport out here, which is an entire another mixed bag that I got a few comments concerning, the airport operations and managing a airport instead of just a flight school. So sometimes our aircraft will be on the ramp just because a jet comes in and they have hangar priority. And airport operation as a whole and a slew of issues, as it's a little bit different with an inherent flight school. But this does concern the overall culture, as we have to be able to talk about that. And there's a few comments that did come up associated with that. It was highly requested by the Price comments that they want a acceptable safety meeting. And the last couple meetings have actually been like that way. That's just a notable comment that I did bring up. Lastly, for Brigham, it's about 7 participants, about a fifth. They have roughly similar to Price and about just under 60 total people that can actually be asked. So pretty small sample size. This could be possible due to the distance from Logan and Price, and the outreach opportunities from Logan. Everyone's in dispatch, everyone's talking about it. And in Price, I'm obviously there. I can get this word around. There wasn't really a demographic or a person to really share that this survey was really trying to be pushed in Brigham. So that's part of the reason there. As for the actual overall responses, it mirrored Logan. According to the definition, right, similar and very similar, but there was some comments that, hey, it might not be safe, and some other believe that, hey, it's definitely safe. So kind of back and forth on there. Safety concerns that were brought up, and the 7 people that actually did respond, was maintenance. Very similar to that known issues that we already knew about, and kind of very similar to Price in that actual area. Again, external traffic. I didn't know how much this hazard was actually going to be brought up, but it was. There's some other traffic that is in the area um, that people are actually witnessing as they go. So, meat and potatoes, where are we at? So, current culture, we're developing and maturing. There's a lot of data here that I did not include in the results that I was able to go and scour through. What this is, and according to like the industry standard, is that we are currently developing a very strong safety culture. Now, is it right now strong? No, it is not, but we're getting there. And we're starting to get to the mature stage. We just need to start answering those issues, and we can see kind of where that goes here. However, overall, I would say most of the comments believe that we actually operate safely and that we are considered a safer culture. Now, I like to compare this to the definition of safety culture to really understand exactly where we're at. So, starting off, are we informed? Well, the whole point of the survey is to gather that information. But according to the survey data, hey, safety reports are helping inform other people. Something that's not in these bullet points is we have the safety newsletter that the committee issued out every month, and some comments did say, hey, we actually read those safety newsletters and you actually got something out of them. And we also have our mandatory safety meetings every semester, usually at the start of the semester. That does highlight some safety issues that people did say sometimes they're quite boring, but sometimes they do get a lot of good information out of them to help inform not just aviation leadership within the program, but also just a normal demographic. As for reporting, students, about 40% said that they actually know how to report or have actually reported. 60 said maybe/no. They don't actually know, which we want to bump that up a little bit more. Flight operations, 50-50 across the board. We didn't get a ton of flight operations because the role is pretty vast and a lot of people are students or CFIs within the flight ops realm. But 50-50, especially for operations personnel, they should be able to report. Kind of a highlighted area there. Leadership, 80-20. That was pretty good for leadership, at least know how to actively report or have actually reported, which is good. And then CFIs. All of our CFI applicants, I believe there was about 47 of them, all said we know how to report and file safety reports, which is amazing, especially because those are your mainline workers in a flight school like this. Now we just. The best, according to the data, the best demographic to really show this was the CFIs and students. Students were a mixed bag. CFIs, they were kind of central on the moderate. Some CFIs were like, leadership kind of drops the ball a little bit. And some CFIs are like, no, they handle it quite well. The majority of them are right in the center. They're moderately just, harsh on too many issues, or too harsh on issues that don't matter too much, or not harsh enough on issues that should have been handled well beforehand, especially in some of those free response sections. As for flexible, this was kind of a hard one to judge by a survey like this, but we can see through some of the data and some of the questions we did ask that we are in a little bit of a flexible realm. However, we have to identify what exactly can we be flexible around and what can't we. So in relation, the program is growing very fast. We have 2 new campuses. Obviously, Price has been here for a little bit, about almost 6 years, 2 years before or about a year and a half before I got here, and Brigham is relatively new. That should alleviate some of the increasing growing Logan, Maine, but who knows how much that's going to grow, and even if we do add some more campuses. Some of the issues that we have tried to conform to, like SOP changes or something like that, we can control what USU can control, but the traffic pattern, you can control all sides of the traffic pattern, but not everything else. For example, in USU Logan, right? So this was kind of a hard section to judge. We just have to kind of look at it from that brighter scope there. As for our learning culture, from all responses, it actually seems like USU is more of a reactive than a proactive culture. Ideally, a good learning culture is actually learning on the successes and understanding how we can do better to maintain a constant, safe environment. And it feels like USU is more reactive on that aspect. Something does happen, We learn from it and then go from there. So we are learning. Ideally, we can learn from the successes or the things that haven't happened yet and continue to grow. Some changes are being made according to those comments. Hey, SOPs new SOPs just dropped this last semester, and it was highlighting some of those comments. However, some issues are a little late. Some of the comments are like, hey, certain student or certain program demographics or certain program students are feeling like, hey, we are kind of being let go here. These same flight procedures are just not working out for us. And it's like, oh yeah, let's change them, and they don't end up getting changed. So there's a couple comments on there. And the traffic pattern, right? The traffic pattern, the traffic in Logan, what can we learn from our mistakes? It is very, very busy. Can USU actually do anything, right? We talked about the uncontrollable and controllable. But there's a lot of USU internal stuff that has been seen, a lot of different comments that this is going to be an issue, and how can we actually learn from it? So, personally, in my 4 years, and in my opinion, I do feel like we actually are becoming a safe organization. From when I was a freshman, at least down in the Price campus, and my understanding of Logan, we were actually a little bit more on the safer side now than I think, back then. Partly that is probably my safety committee bias, but I've also known it's like when I first started the safety committee, we didn't have much things, and now we're meeting every week, have a lot of different more roles. We're updating different SOPs and procedures, working on different surveys like this one and different projects to really enhance our culture. Little overview on campus by campus, kind of where the culture's at. Logan, again, very similar to the overall culture. Hey, we're not terrible, but we're also not, perfect. We're not great, right? It really goes back to those safety concerns, and are we actually learning and adapting to those different changes? The overall Logan culture does influence greatly to the other campuses. Price, not as much, but Brigham for sure due to that close distance. Price is a newer-ish culture. Again, 6 years. Logan's been around forever, right? So they're growing in various areas, especially as the program expands. Now we have maintenance, airport operations, drones is becoming a bigger thing down on the Price campus. There's a lot of different things that are growing all at once, so these issues are starting to rise. Some of them are being handled, some of them are kind of being pushed on the back burner according to those comments, so we just kind of have to watch out for that. Again, airport and flight school does have a kind of complex relationship on the safety side of things. Wasn't highlighted too much in the comments, but this is my assessment of it. The culture is very intertwined. It's not like Logan where, hey, it's just a flight school, and Logan airport operations are a different breed. So it's just some more stuff to consider when really looking at the safety culture at a Price. As for Brigham, again, I have the least experience in there, and according to my position, it is the newest culture. It does have a lot of overlap with the Logan campus, so some of the issues do align with there. However, it's starting to get its identity, right? It is similar to a small campus, smaller environment, a little bit more safer. It doesn't have near enough traffic as Logan. However, you have that valley traffic coming up. That was highlighted in those responses there. So, hopefully they can continue to grow, right? The the survey itself and the participants, there's only 7, so hopefully we can get that up to really give a good identity over Brigham, to really assess where that campus is as a culture. So how do we improve? According to me, again, the big thing is continuing these safety improvements. Again, my committee side, I've noticed a lot of those in the last 4 years, right? We're doing different projects, working on different things, more emphasis on that safety reporting style of awareness and protections that are given. So if you continue to go through those and highlight and solve some of the issues that do come up, the safer we are going to be as a USU program. Some of the stuff we can't fix. We can only fix so much on the traffic side of front for us. At least according to the comments, that pattern in Logan, if everyone's trying to get in there, we can only change so many different SOPs before all the GA aircraft that need to go in there go. Again, tower is an option there, but we can speculate on if that's going to happen or not. but we can at least control what we can control, and hopefully keep adapting SOPs to help our organization be safer within the cards that we were dealt out of that specific airport. As for the other campuses, maintenance, price, let's keep adapting those procedures. Keep on the oversight side of things, keep changing and working on being better in the maintenance side of things, or trying to figure out how we can get more accurate forecasts for the unpredictable weather, especially in price. This survey itself could be another big thing. If we can send this survey, at least once a year, maybe once a semester, it might be able to get a little bit more traction, and we can actually start sending a little bit more data to really evaluate where the culture is at USU. And lastly, just keep building us USU safety, or just USU culture in general. I'm starting to see, at least in my opinion, especially out of the Price campus, we're divided down here. Feel like we're kind of our own thing, even though we're part of the USU aviation umbrella. Now, ideally, we are diverse. That diversity is our strong suit, but we are still a USU Aviation Committee. The safety issues up in Logan do affect Price. Price safety issues affect Logan. The Brigham safety issues affect Logan and vice versa, right? So we want to be able to have a good culture that supports this and supports being safe and flexible, just, informed, has an active reporting program, etc. And kind of a couple final things here is I want to talk about my experience really building this survey. Really rewarding overall. A lot of different comments. Ideally, I want a little bit more response to people, but as a instructor and seeing the issues and really highlighting this is a lot of information. And I'm now 33 minutes into this video, and I've glossed over a lot of the data that was there. There's so much information to really be had. It was very rewarding to see all that. Hopefully, all this data, now that I've stepped away and about ready to graduate, the next people that are behind me can really take this data and use it to identify those safety issues and try to grow. It was a ton of work, semester and a half plus, right? A lot of different things, different trying. So very glad to have it really done. And I'm going to take a lot of this experience learned as a safety committee and diving into the differences in safety or aviation safety throughout my entire career. It's going to be great. What I learned, USU is pretty much right in the middle. Kind of what I figured going into this survey, but it does make sense. We're still growing in this whole safety culture identity, and we're gonna still keep on building on it. Hopefully, we don't fall back behind. I don't think that's gonna happen, but I do see that improvement, and hopefully, we can continue that improvement as we go forward. What I do better on this survey, especially next time, and I've advised people if they do run this again, are a couple of things. Qualtrics does a great job. I overdid the data, I think. A lot of different questions, a lot of different repeated questions for different campuses. I divided it in just the roles and the campus. I could have kept it a little more simplified, which would have helped a lot of my research, and the hours and hours and hours of diving through data would have been a little easier if I, on the front half, made sure that everything was formatted correctly. Mandatory. We'll see about in the future if this is going to be mandatory. I do like to keep it the anonymous side of things and kind of free so people can really share their opinions. However, as you start making it mandatory, you're gonna lose the authenticity of those free responses that you really want to have going into a survey like this. So it's going to be a kind of mixed bag on what the next committee chairman on this side of things, or whoever takes up this survey, is really going to have to look at. Hey, do we really want to make this mandatory, and are we going to get the same data out of it? Larger server demographic. Again, if you make it mandatory, you'll get more people. But again, is it actually authentic? Actually good opinions, and not just something that someone wants to say. Lastly, probably could have advertised it even more. Maybe I could have myself gone to Brigham, taught it around safety committee, or even in our big safety meeting, we mention it, but really harp on it. Hey, this is, your guys' opinions. We really want to see where we're at, so hopefully we can learn. Is the increased awareness, hopefully that can help with that larger survey demographic and really get it, more responses to really assess where we're at. All right, so really hope this tool in the future can be used. You leave the legacy. Hopefully, all this data we did gather can give, leadership and the safety personnel, as well as the rest of us that are in this amazing program and this amazing culture called USU Aviation, some good insight. Good insight about where we are, how can we improve, what issues are there, and even then, just to be informed on where we're exactly at. So that's pretty much all for me. Kind of a long video. I apologize. There's a lot of stuff to get through. As you can see, this is a very, very big project. Again, glossed over a lot of different data sets, different questions that were asked. And it was a very rewarding project. I was very glad to have it. Hopefully, USU can continue on this project, and we'll go from there. Lastly, this is my reference list. There's a lot of them in there. Thank you very much for listening to this presentation, and hopefully you got something out of it. I'm sure that I did, and yeah, we can all try to be a better, culture, one step at a time, and this is one of those steps. So thank you very much.